how do you start a movement? I get asked that question weirdly a lot because for the last several years, I have been honored to lead a digital movement in my church. My church is called First Capital Christian, and I'm the lead pastor there. And prior to becoming the lead pastor of our church, I started our digital expression of church called Church Anywhere, which many of you guys might be familiar with, back in 2016. And what's unique about us is that our church is in a very, very small town. We're in a town called Corydon, Indiana, and it's 3,500 people. And our church is around 1,000 people in person. And then we have just a wide reach of various things online through this movement that has been created over the last several years. So it's a unique scenario. And I was asked the question for this video, how do you start a movement, specifically using digital means? And so today, what I would like to do is I would like to give you ways that we started this. Most importantly, God started this. This was not a thing where I would love to be able to take credit for this. This is not a thing though where I can. We just used technology because it existed and God kind of did the rest. But what I can share with you are some practical leadership skills that I've learned over the last few years in regards to this movement that has been started. Our church is very strange. We started out doing online out of necessity. We are dead end street on the wrong side of town, and we are gridlocked. So we cannot possibly expand our church building. And so we only really started using digital as a way to get the message of the gospel of Jesus out to the community because we couldn't have more people in our building. In fact, we worship in a dead end street that won't even allow a sign to be put outside. So there literally is no drive-by traffic whatsoever. And so we started doing online ministry back in 2016 and really going full force in it because we realized we aren't going to grow very much more in person, but there's a lot of people that are consuming content online. So when we started Church Anywhere, we knew it had to be more than just a live stream. For us, you've never heard of us, so you have not been Googling our sermons. We don't have a Craig Rochelle. We don't have an Andy Stanley. And so nobody was searching for our communicators. But what we could offer was relationships. Back in 2016, social media was like the Wild West. Organic reach was just like crazy. And so you could form actual relationships if you focused on the social portion of social media very easily. And that's how we built our ministry. The thing that we say all the time is that relationships trump technology. And that's really the foundation of how the movement started for us. It was out of necessity, but we focused on relationships and not necessarily on the actual content as much. And so for us, that's how it started. I can't guarantee anything for you, but this is just our personal experience. But through all of this stuff that we've got to experience, there has been a few nuggets that I've picked up on. And the first one is this. You have to learn how to cast vision. If you're going to start a movement, whether it's digital or in person or with your friends or with your family, whatever it is, you have to, as a leader, be good at casting vision. Now, there's a difference between having an idea and then casting the vision for that idea. And after years of experience, I think the key to the difference is the word for. In all of my years of ministry experience, even pre-digital, so I'm on a decade right now of full-time ministry experience. It's not that much, but it's enough to learn some ropes. If you can convince someone you are for them and that the idea you are presenting will benefit them or the kingdom that they can be a part of, you can cast vision to them. But the minute that you become antagonistic and you have all the answers and you are against them, then they will not follow your vision. For example, when we first started microsites, which many of you guys are familiar with microsites, we have a bunch of them. that have stemmed from the church. They're as close as our town, all the way across the world. We have these microsites, but when we first started them, I tried to convince our elders to start these microsites. And this is how I said it. I was like, microsites are a digital expression of worship that uses technology to reach people. And it's going to be something that we can try. I don't know if it's going to work. Now, nothing about what I said made it seem like I was for them, and nothing I said made it seem like I was for anything. It made it seem like I just wanted to take technology and have people not come to the building. If I could go back in time, knowing what I know now, I would have said something along the lines of, there is a way we can help people find and follow Jesus that will never step foot in our building. And I think that we can do this very inexpensively through digital content that we create that would help people gather together in person in order to hear about Jesus. And you guys can be a part of it and be on the forefront of it if you would allow us to try this. There's a huge difference in how I said those two things, but if I would have said it the second way, it probably wouldn't have been the very first thing cut from the budget that year. See, if we can convince people we are for them, if we can convince people that it's partially their idea and they can be a part of something, we have a greater chance at starting a movement and galvanizing people, which leads me to my second nugget. It's not enough just to cast the vision. You have to implement with action. And that's the harder of the two. My background's in filmmaking. I went to school for film and audio engineering, and I have a lot of creativity in me. And so lots of people I went to school with and lots of people that I'm associated with have a really hard time having an idea, but also making it happen. That's why if you go to Hollywood right now, there's a ton of writers that are working at Starbucks or as Uber drivers, because while they might have great scripts, they have no idea how to actually make these things happen. You can learn that. It's not something that is unlearnable. The hard part is forcing yourself out of your comfort zone to actually learn how to do these things. The Bible tells us that nothing is impossible with Christ. So any idea that you have, if Christ is the center of it, it is a possible idea. You just have to do your part. You have to do the work. You have to be a part of implementation. And if you are a part of implementation, then you can galvanize other people. See, the issue in American church right now, at least a lot of times, is that we have the CEO model of leadership to where it's from the top down and the vision is cast, but then the CEO never actually is part of the implementation of the vision. Movements don't start that way. Movements are started with someone who has a vision and is willing to be on the front horse leading the army into that vision. So for us, specifically with microsites, if we want to keep that train running throughout this whole video, once I convinced the elders about the vision, I knew I had to be a part of these microsites. So any of the local ones, I went to every single one of them for the first 6 weeks at least that they were meeting. And sometimes I was driving all the way like an hour or two to get to these, but I knew I had to lead forward in that so that our eldership could see that I believed in this vision so much, and I believed that it was a great thing for them and for the church and for the kingdom, that I was willing to give up my own time to sacrifice family time and things that I would just want to do, like hobbies, to be at these places because I believe God was going to use them that much. So you have to be able to implement the vision, and you have to be able to lead from the front of that vision if you're going to start a movement. Another good example is our church makes movies. So because I have my background in film, if I would have just had this great idea, hey, let's make a movie as a church, that would be an idea that probably would have never happened. But if I was able to cast this vision to a group of producers from the church and then also lead from the front, then we're cooking with gas. And now we've been making movies since 2017, and we have another movie coming out this summer that's a national release with Hollywood actors. But the most important part is we've seen, as recently as last weekend, 611 people in Uganda came to the Lord for the very first time because they watched one of our movies. That's because we're part of this movement now, but it started because there was a vision that I was able to cast and allow people to think that they were part of it and I was for them. And then I led out from the front. Now, I'm not at all taking credit for any of this. God gets all the glory and the honor and praise. I would just ask simply to make this video. So please do not hear that this was me by any means. God did all the work. These are just little leadership tips that I've learned along the way. And probably the biggest one of these tips, if you look at the last three that we have, which is cast vision, implement action, lead from the front, the fourth one, and maybe the most important, is you have to be okay with multiplying that vision. It's a really big trap for many of us to get to a point where we have to be the people with the ideas all the time. It's easy to multiply things that were our idea. So like microsites, it's easy for me to say I started this microsite movement and other people have jumped on board. So they're making more and more microsites. Well, that's fine because it was my idea in the first place. What's hard is allowing other people to have their own vision and getting behind it. So for example, one of the things that we do at our church is called digital missionaries. And we have someone on staff who ended up falling in love with this idea of using TikTok and her personal platform to reach people online who are struggling with mental health and anxiety, and then funnel them into a blog, which then funneled them into talking to a pastor and then getting in groups. And that's a great idea. But the danger of being a top level leader and being very selfish is that I could have very easily said, that's a cool idea. We're not going to do that. It doesn't fit with my vision. But I had to pray and ask God for the humility to allow myself to not get into that mindset and allow my vision that was initially this digital church to multiply with a different expression through digital missionaries. I had to become the greatest cheerleader ever for digital missionaries. And now our church has about 8 people who have gone through a training program to become social media influencers to lead people to Jesus. And had I squelched that and become a bottleneck, that would have never happened. You have to be okay with visions that morph and multiply. It's everybody knows you have to multiply people. Like that's like leadership 101, multiply people. But the harder part is allowing vision to multiply, vision to mold into something else. And I'm not saying allow vision to drift. Because your mission still stays the same. I'm saying allow other people to have a voice, and then don't be so selfish to not cheerlead them when their ideas are successful. That sounds like something so simple, but it's something I see all the time in churches where the only ideas can come from the lead pastor, or the only ideas can come from the leadership team. Guys, at some point, we are all equal under the foot of the cross. We're sinners saved by the grace of Jesus Christ, and we're all part of one body, and he's given us all specific gifts and skill sets. So as leaders, allow people to play into those specific gifts and skill sets, and I think you'll start seeing amazing results out of that. I keep using the word movement because I'm not really sure what else to call it. For our church in a small town in southern Indiana of not that many people, we have our hands in a lot of things digitally. We do a great job of reaching people through felt needs like mental health and grief and money management. We do an awesome job reaching people through groundbreaking digital content. We're working with the people from The Chosen right now to produce this movie. We do a lot of online training. We do a lot of online discipleship through gamifying discipleship with apps and things like that. And that has formed a movement. But none of that would have happened if we hadn't have followed these 4 tips. If we had just said we want to do online ministry and had never cast a vision, we probably would just be streaming our services like most churches. If we hadn't have implemented that vision, we probably would have streamed our services through 2020 and then said, well, nobody's watching anymore, so therefore we should probably just stop. But we didn't. We cast a vision and we implemented that vision and we stuck to that vision. And then we had leaders, not just me, who led forward into that movement. They were the people on the front horse in front of the army, leading the army into battle in these various avenues that followed behind that vision. And then finally, we became okay with multiplying that vision. As we grew, we had more and more volunteers and staff members come on board with their own ideas, and we allowed them to play into those passion areas. And because of that, we've seen a really large movement start out of a really small place. In fact, over the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, we've baptized over 500 people through microsites or online connections. It's incredible. That's the number one thing I want you to take away from this video, what I'm about to say. If one person had come to Christ, all of this work to create this movement would have been worth it. But 500 is something that we will never, ever take for granted. Like 500 people that we now get to worship Jesus with for all of eternity. Nothing that we could do in our entire lifetime could be more important than those people's eternal salvation. And so if you're planning to start some kind of online ministry, digital expression of your church, if you're praying for God to be making revival through that online ministry, if you're trying to start some kind of movement or whatever you want to call it, if you lose sight of the main thing, even if you follow every leadership tip that you're going to learn in this entire series or the ones that I just shared with you, if you lose sight of helping people find and follow Jesus, then you've lost the whole thing. It's never about technology. It's never about a person. It's never about a leadership style. It's never about anything that you can do. It's you allowing God to work through you and giving him all of the glory and the honor and the praise. That's what sparks a movement. So like I said, I gave you 4 nuggets that I've learned along the way. And I'm always open to talk to people. So you can get my information from Leadership Network or from Jeff Reed or whoever. And I'm always willing to answer questions. But I will tell you consistently the same thing, that God has to be the one that's driving this thing. A movement will not start without the Holy Spirit being invited into it, welcoming God into this movement and this expression of his church. And if you do that and then implement some practical leadership tools, then you're cooking with gas and you're going to start seeing a lot of life change.